Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small. Today, I'm joined by Luke Milton of Training Mate. Luke, thank you so much for joining me today.
Cam, it's an absolute pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so to kick things off, I'd love to start out with your upbringing. Where
Yeah.
did you grow up, and what would you say your childhood was like?
Mate, I had a really normal, great childhood. I grew up in the suburbs of Sydney, Australia, and we just had a very fair upbringing. My dad was a cop, my mum was a dental nurse,
Mm,
and we just had one of those upbringings where everything was safe.
mm,
We didn't know, we didn't need for anything, but we didn't have extra.
yeah,
So I would say that of modern day sort of terminology, we probably grew up working class, maybe just a little level above working class, but very honest. Family was everything. And
mm,
again, as I said, we needed for nothing. There's
yeah,
always stuff that we had. We just didn't have any extra. It
yeah,
was like there wasn't too many dinners out. It was dinners at home, and vacations were to the grandparents' homes, and that was
yeah.
wonderful. I
Love it.
grew up with I've got an older brother, and we had a great childhood together, and the kids in the street became your extended family and
Mm,
your stepbrothers, so to speak. And we had our little gang of BMX bike riders that got around the streets of Bangor, and we loved it. It was a great upbringing. I look back at it with really fond memories.
love it. Well, what were some of your interests growing up? I mean, back in Sydney, your parents, did they have any impact on kind of your direction as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, most people that grow up, for starters, I feel very fortunate. I had both of my parents in the same house for the entire childhood and still to this day, which I
Mm,
feel very, very fortunate about. My
yep.
dad, my dad was a very honest, hardworking, tough guy, so I would say that he had a lot of impact on where I went
Mm,
in life. And we'll talk about my previous career in professional sports. But dad always had a bit of a hit on me because I loved the fact that he was a cop. I loved the fact that he was a bit of a tough guy. I loved all of that type of thing. So I would say he inspired me to get into contact sports. So when I
mm,
was a kid, I loved playing soccer and I loved athletics, anything to do with sports. I
mm,
really loved from day one. And
yeah.
then, when I turned about 10, the ripe old age of 10, I discovered, I really had a passion for rugby league,
Mm,
contact sport. I just really enjoyed it. And then
yeah.
as we evolved and grew up and I grew and genetics took place and physiology took place, then I really started to embrace it. I embraced the tough side of it. I embraced just the contact side of it. I loved, that my dad had played that sport before me. So
Mm,
yeah, he definitely had an impact on my life and where our hobbies went. And
yeah.
I'd say equally the local neighborhood, right? The kids
Mm,
that you went to school with, it's different now.
yeah.
When I grew up, I'm 42. So when I grew up, it was like, oh gosh, it's now the street lights came on and that meant we had to come home. But other than
Yeah,
that, you're out of the house, you're riding your bike, you're
for sure.
exploring, you're building tunnels and cubby houses and jump ramps that are definitely not safe. It's like, but you were being a kid.
Yeah.
And I think that all of that stuff went a long way into forming not only my passions and my interests and hobbies as a kid, but
Mm,
actually later on in life, a lot of the qualities and values that I still hold to this day.
love it. Where do you think your love of rugby came from? So in the States, as you know it, it's blown up in the past few years. But in Sydney,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been around for a while and probably really popular around there. So where did that love come from?
Cam, it's like a religion over there. It's you
Yeah.
kind of you played rugby growing up, and that was just what you did. I think that I've always been just fixated and hooked on the team aspect, the
Mm,
community. I don't think I'd be on my own in that, but
mhm,
really knowing that I had a group of mates there, and that started at school and that evolved into the club team. But just knowing that I had a group of guys there ready for me through the good times, the bad times, the everyday times, ready
mm,
made group of friends. We trained together. At the time, it felt hard. As we got on a little bit later, it probably
mm,
wasn't that hard, but just hanging out with each other. I always fell in love with the social side of team sports more than the sport itself. And
yeah.
even when I was a young kid, I just loved being with my best mates. I still
Mm,
remember the days like Benny McClellan, my childhood best mate. We were
mm,
10 years old and we'd play rugby league and we'd get together and then you have sleepovers on the Friday night before the game or the Saturday night. Your parents went to dinner and felt we were independent. We had the house to ourselves and it was just
yeah.
cool. It was just that's what I fell in love with.
Love it. So that trajectory for you in rugby, I mean,
Yeah.
you reached great heights. What does that journey look like for you? So you went to school, and was rugby a part of that schooling as well? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, it evolved into it. So as I said, I grew up in quite a working class area. Fantastic. I loved that part of it. And then I always mention this guy, no matter what interview I do or whatever. I've got to give him credit all the time, because a guy called Greg Willett, who I'm still very close friends with, he was a player agent when I was growing up. And when I was 14 years of age, Greg had identified some sort of talent, and he approached us, and I had gotten an offer from a team called the Sydney Roosters, or a club called the Sydney Roosters, who would be the equivalent, and I don't want to offend anyone on this, but would have been equivalent to the sort of like the Patriots, right? They just won everything. Or maybe now the Chiefs now, they've probably taken on that sort of realm now. Fantastic players, very high profile team. So I was 14 years of age, and I had an offer for them to come into their academy and to develop, and to come across from where I was, which was probably an hour from where I lived. And there was a few lifestyle changes there. And anyway, Greg, when he found out about this, he said, no, you don't want the money. I think they offered me 10 grand or something. But as a 14-year-old kid, I mean, may as well have been 10 million, right? I mean, there was no limit to what $10,000 could do for a 14-year-old kid. And he was like, no, you don't want the money. Let's try and get you into a good school. At the time, I was at the local public school, high school, and it was fine. It was great. It was had a great group of people that I knew there. And then, so anyway, he orchestrated a deal where the Roosters put me into an all-boys school, a very prestigious school in Australia, Sydney, Australia, called the Scots College. And I would say that would be the single most impactful thing that ever happened to me in life. I was 15 years of age. I went into this school that was very different to where I was in the public school system, and I was just like a duck to water. The first step into the premises and onto the college, and it was blazers and ties and everything, and I loved it. I thrived. Day one, I met some of my best mates still to this day. We're so close, spread around the world, but so close, and just developed some real tangibly beautiful relationships with some of the guys there. And what else it did for me going to that school and evolving into it, that's what exposed me to this other sport that I played called rugby, which is really confusing. There are actually two sports, rugby league and rugby union. Rugby league's kind of like the working class tough guy sport. Rugby union is a more private school, kind of snotty type, educated thing. Kind of the same game with a couple of little indiscretions. But that going to Scots exposed me to rugby union, and it also exposed me to a different way of life. I believe this is true what I'm about to say, that I think, because my dad was a cop, I think that the school fees of Scots at the time were actually more than my dad was earning as a full-time police officer. Like, smart guy, like, honourable, smart sort of career. And it was just a different world. And it exposed me to all that other side of the Sydney elite or the Sydney business or the things that I just hadn't grown up with. And then what that did for me, which I've really realized the last couple of years, it humanized success. The guys that I got to meet there and the people that I became so close with, I got exposed to people that were kind of fictional before that. The success, I just always thought, rich people just know things that I don't know, or they were born into things, or there's a magic pill, or they've got no problems. That's another big mistake, And then when I got to see the human side of success or the human side of wealth or whatever that may be, it was really interesting because it exposed me to the possibility of that being something that I could attain and something that I could achieve. So it actually changed the trajectory of my life, not just in the moment, but also for my future goals for myself. And that was just amazing. And why I'm so grateful for sport is that sport was my equalizer in that. So we may not have had the same financial wealth of a lot of the families that we got to know, but my sporting abilities actually evened that playing field. So I had a tangible asset that a lot of those people were attracted to. And I learned really, really quickly that life is a bunch of transactions, and it's not just wealth. It's not just sporting ability. It's not just academia or IQ, or there's a whole heap of different tangents out there, and everyone is actually really good at something, and that's really quite cool. And work out what it is.
For sure. I love it. What did that lifestyle look like? I mean, many years playing professionally rugby. I
Yeah.
mean, travel-wise, family-wise, what did that look like for, I mean, your whole rugby career is extensive.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah,
I turned professional at 18 years of age. It was an
incredible.
absolute childhood dream. I think
Yeah.
I actually I played my first professional game first year out of high school. It was incredible. You know, it
Mm,
was just one of those really surreal experiences in my life. Sometimes I've actually got to think back to those times, like that really happened. Like, quite
yeah,
cool.
that's awesome.
And yeah, and it was a great experience. I think that's what I'd aimed to do since I was 10 years of age, and getting to achieve that, getting to have the relationships with some of the guys that I've looked up to since I was a
Mm,
teenager and almost idolized, and then being on the same field as them and being able to contribute to a common goal.
mm,
Those things to me were really important, and I
yeah.
really loved that. I really thrived in those conditions. It
Mm,
taught me another thing, which really sort of got onto my later career in starting training, mate, and that was this
yeah.
philosophy of social health. Being in a
Mm,
professional team, you showed up at 8 o'clock in the morning for your first session, and there was 25 guys waiting for me. Could have had a good day, a bad day, an everyday, normal day, and they were there waiting for me. They were mates, and
yeah.
that became really, really important to me. Then,
Mm,
talking about exactly what the question was there, the
yep.
traveling with them. Then all of a
Mm,
sudden, you start traveling internationally with 25 guys, and you bond really quickly, right?
yeah.
Because it's not just a job anymore. Now you're living together, and now
Yeah.
you're, socializing together as 24/7,
Mm,
and learning how to, get along with different personalities, learning how to adapt, learning how to be vulnerable, get
mm,
support, and really thrive in a team environment. That's the part that I just loved it. I loved
mm,
it. I loved every part of it. Probably for all the good of it, I would say I wasn't the best. I was young, so I didn't have a wife or I didn't have kids or anything like that.
yeah.
But look, probably wasn't the best boyfriend because sport was my priority,
Mm,
travel was my priority. I think that as a young athlete, I hadn't learnt life skills yet of
mm,
sharing and doing all the rest of it. So I think I was probably a little bit selfish in a lot of
yeah.
ways, and learning that along the way was really enlightening.
Mm, love it.
Yeah,
At what point in the journey did you then come to the States? I'm curious. I mean, maybe this is all the way up to training mate, but what
yeah,
introduced you to that interest to coming to the States after this long career in Sydney?
yeah. It was actually my wife.
Mm,
So look, I've always been fascinated by America.
yeah.
Absolutely fascinated from growing up and watching the TV shows and really just really embracing just the American culture. I loved how things were bigger. I loved the commercialization of things. I loved the
Mm,
sports, the celebrities. I loved everything about America. It was
yeah.
so funny. Even when I think I was like 15 or 16, I'm like, oh, I'm going to marry an American girl. Like I made that statement. It was so crazy.
Yeah.
And that came true. I think I manifested that, right? So I meet my now wife. She went to Georgetown University. She was in Sydney doing a semester abroad. I'd had a
Mm,
shoulder reconstruction. I'm coming back. I was working at like a really good friend of mine's backpacker bar, and she happened to stumble across there, and we met. We dated for 6 months because she was there, and didn't have much else to do. So we dated for 6 months. She had a year left at Georgetown. I had a year left of my contract with rugby.
mhm.
Anyway, long story short, we played against England at Twickenham. It was great. I go to New York with my mate who had come to watch the game, and I
Mm,
ran into Kerry again. She was in New York now looking
wow.
for an apartment. Fell back in love. I'm like, what am I doing? This is insane. I asked her to come back to Australia with me. She called me crazy and said absolutely not, that she'd just been to Georgia and she was moving to New York. And so I went home and retired and I moved to New York. And
Wow.
thankfully, 12, 15, 16 years later, we're now married. We've got businesses together. We're partners in everything we do. We have a
Wow.
beautiful 9-year-old daughter, and we've created a life for ourselves. So it worked
Incredible.
out.
Wow, what a story. So, I mean, with that transition, what was that like career-wise? Like when you came to the States, what were you
Yeah,
doing? I'm curious.
not much.
Yeah.
Not much. So it was a transition. I think the one thing that people don't pay enough attention to with athletes is it's a big transition.
Mm,
A lot of professional athletes actually have that as their identity. And that might not be so healthy, but you're not really balanced when you're a professional athlete. It's all for the team, all for the crest on your chest, all for
Mm,
that Saturday game, Sunday game, Friday night game, whatever you're going to do. And my
mm,
years fell between the months of February and November. It was the
mm.
season, February and October. That was my year. I would refer to last year as last season. And
I
so
see.
it was it was a mindset. So, transition was huge and I wasn't ready for it. But I think the best thing ever was I moved to New York when I
Mm,
transitioned across. Had I stayed in Sydney, I 100% would have been come back in and made a comeback and I would have played again. I would have missed the boys. I would have missed all of that sort of thing. But
yeah.
going to New York made me get on with life pretty quick and
Mm,
identified a love for fitness and wellness and physiology. And I started a little thing called Aussie Boot Camp in Central Park. And that was my
mm,
little entrepreneurial side coming out. And we
yeah.
turned that into like a phenomenon within weeks. Before Instagram, before Facebook, before all that sort of stuff was really
Wow.
viral. So we used it from just people sending an email around the office, which was so fantastic.
Mm,
And it was a great lifestyle, and it was a
mm,
lifestyle that had no pressure on me. I
yeah.
played socially, unpaid, but played unpaid social rugby for a team called New York Athletic Club, and it was the
Mhm.
most fun I'd had playing rugby in 10 years. I
Wow.
loved it. I loved the guys. I loved the sense of purpose, the sense of fulfillment, the sense of contribution. I felt like
Mm,
I could really contribute to the building the game of rugby in America.
yeah.
And I just loved it. It had all the ingredients of the things I loved, and it
Mm,
had none of the pressure of the things I
love it.
didn't love so much about it. But the
Mm,
transition and was great because it made me aware of what I loved. And
yeah.
I think I've said this before, but I came to the conclusion I didn't love the sport of rugby. I loved all
Mm,
the byproducts of playing the sport of rugby. I
yeah.
loved the guys. I loved the team. I loved the locker room. I loved the camaraderie. I
Mm,
loved being a part of something bigger than myself. I loved working with a group of people to
mm,
achieve a common goal. I loved, the responsibility that I had to perform for my mate.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
loved all of that stuff, and I thrived on all of that stuff. I loved pressure. I loved the
Mm,
game coming down to the final minute and potentially being the person that could be the difference, good
yeah.
and bad. There was
Yeah.
plenty of times that I was the difference on the negative side. And then
Mm,
how do you deal with that? And there was a
mm,
few times where I was the difference on the positive side. And how do you deal with that?
yeah.
Because that elation, that jump out of your skin, like this is the greatest moment of my life. But then you've got to go and be a husband, a boyfriend, a son,
Mm,
a brother,
yeah.
and trying to balance that out, these
Mm,
emotional highs and lows. It's kind of lovely to be honest. It was
yeah.
addictive.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm getting is like community is so important to you. I mean, and
Oh
it
my
shows
gosh.
today with Training Mate as well. Um, Building that community, as you mentioned, like the group in Central Park, being a part of the rugby
Yep.
team in New York. At what point did you want to group that physical fitness community to then create something of your own? I know eventually into Training Mate.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually after we saw that. We went back to Australia for a couple of years, and that's when I technically started training, mate. We started as an outdoor boot camp,
Mm,
and it evolved just splitting up into 3 different stations, 3 exercises, exactly what it is now. It was just in an outdoor setting.
yep.
And when we knew we had something there, that's when I really wanted to pour some gasoline on it. And I really had that competitive nature kicked back into me. And I wanted to sort of go out and go against the big boys. So there's a bunch of different chapters to this story, but initially it was called Milton Health Management. So I'm definitely not the most creative person when it comes to branding and naming, but my wife now and girlfriend at the time was working as an executive at Saatchi & Saatchi, a huge advertising
Mm,
company. And we started looking at like scaling Training Mate, or at the time, Milton Health Management. What does that look like? And I wanted to sort of pour some gasoline on it. And I remember sitting in our apartment one night and saying this to her. And she's like, well, it starts with a name and a brand. And, how can we do this? And what makes you different? I'm like, I train with the clients. I'll go for a run with them. Like I was doing
mhm.
8 or 10 sessions a day, but I was doing it with them. Like I loved it.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, so like you're their mate. I'm like, yeah, I'm their mate. And she goes, like,
Mm,
they're training mate. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. And she goes, that's the name, Training Mate. I'm like, it's terrible. That's the worst name I've ever heard. Or will never grow. Like, yeah, no way. Anyway, long story short, she won. She's a lot smarter than I am. And, 12 years, 13 years later, here we are, right, with the brand that we've
wow.
got. But the name was actually an extension of exactly what we did. And still to this day, we're just their mate. We're just their training mate.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So once we started getting a bit of traction with the outdoor stuff, I wanted to get those competitive juices flowing again. We came to America, West Hollywood, which is like the fitness capital of the world. It's like starting a private bank in Manhattan or on Manhattan.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you wouldn't do it. Anyone smart wouldn't do it. But we jumped in there and went up against some of the big guys and some of the, very handsomely private equity and venture capitally backed big guys. And we started taking some market share off them. And then that became addictive. Like that became real, like, how can we service more and more and more people? And when I say started taking market share, we were servicing people that they'd forgotten about.
Yeah.
And that to me was just like, how do we, helping people was just an addictive thing. Like, how can we help more and more and more people? So we start in West Hollywood. Within a year, it's like gone viral. Everyone wanted to be at this Australian-led place, and I think we were all Aussies working there at the time. And we had this like Australian lifestyle concept where everyone was welcome, and we just wanted to have fun and bond. And we had great workouts. Like, we worked hard, but we played hard, and everyone was welcome, and everyone felt safe, and everyone felt valued, and everyone felt served.
Yeah.
And that's what Training Mate still is to this day. And then 2 years later, we opened Studio City, which became just as impressive as West Hollywood, and we serviced even more people, and then Santa Monica, and then so on and so forth. And then COVID hit. And the worst part of COVID for me was not that we had to shut down, not all that sort of stuff, or close temporarily. The worst part was that I didn't feel like I could serve people anymore. So we did this Mate to Go thing, and that satisfied it a little bit, but that's not what our secret sauce was. Our secret sauce was getting that human connection and making sure that we were the best part of our client's day, and really like taking that stuff seriously. And so went through all the things. And when I realized how important Training Mate was to people, I was getting emails from people who were like, quote, suicidal because they didn't have Training Mate in their life anymore. And they felt that they were separated, and they felt that they didn't have anything or anything to live for. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, when we came out of it, I was like, 2.0, let's go. I got to get this out. This is not even a want anymore. This is a need. Like, I got to get this out to more people. How do we do it? So we did a small raise, a little friends and family raise, and we started expanding. And we're now across the country. We're about to open in Nevada. We've got, I think, 13 units now with a bunch more in the pipeline. And we're scaling, and we're trying to serve as many people as we can. And the beautiful thing is that every market that we opened in Dallas, Texas, which I'm now headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and we're going to serve the Texas market. And we've got a couple of studios in Dallas now, and Austin is opening really soon, and Houston's opening. And what was fascinating to me was the impact on the communities was the same as Los Angeles. You couldn't get two more different cities. It's crazy. But the community was served the exact same way, and the benefits of the community and what the community got out of it was the exact same thing across the country. So that's a part of me now where I'm just like, I'm just all systems go. We're franchising now. My job is to really help franchisees create the same communities that we've done across the board of corporate. And I still get a kick out. My voice is croaky. I just came from teaching 2 classes in our West Hollywood. I'm in Los Angeles now. And I love it. I love every part of it. I love that we can be a positive part of people's day. I love that we can, really help people grow their social health, mental health, and physical health, and create a healthier lifestyle. And that's where I'm driven now. I just want to keep pouring gasoline on that.
Love it. So you're at the franchise model now, but that first expansion into in the LA area, then Santa Monica, was that franchised, or what was that growth? No. What was that then? Was that some of your mates that you had first location?
No, that's all cash flow. So all of the corporate ones were just raised out of cash flow. So we started West Hollywood, and I had no idea what I was doing. Let me tell you, I'd never heard about a burn rate. I'd never heard about a P&L. I'd never heard about a balance sheet. I'd never heard about inventory, vendors. That was all Mandarin to me. I just didn't know it. But the beautiful part about being an entrepreneur, especially a founding entrepreneur, is that you learn quick. And I had to evolve, and I had to go from being a founder to a manager, and I had to manage people, and I had to manage bank accounts, and I had to manage taxes, and I had to manage P&Ls, and I had to manage responsibilities because, when I was in a park and observatory in Sydney, there was just the responsibility to myself. But now there's staff, and now there's mouths to feed. And if
Yeah.
I don't evolve, and if I don't upskill, then they don't get to pay their rent, they don't get to eat, and they don't get to see their family, and that's not fair. And I've always taken those responsibilities really seriously. So that to me has always just been one of the driving forces to try and work for other people and serve other people. But that was one of the big transitions, and then we grew it all out of cash flow, those initial studios. And then when we took on a little bit of friends and family around, then we started to be able to actually evolve the systems, bring on some C-suite guys, some growth people. And now it's evolved even more where, we've just put together our first board. So I've got a board now of people that really specialize in human connection. Now, one of the guys actually is a very close friend of mine and been a huge part of the growth of Training Mate, or the evolution of the next iteration of Training Mate, is Nick Stone. He's a founder of Bluestone Lane Coffee.
I had Nick on the podcast.
Yeah, he's a
huge
legend.
fan of Bluestone Lane.
Yeah, so am I, trust me. But we share the exact same philosophy of how we should service the community. And Bluestone Lane is just like, mate, products, I love them. I'm addicted to them. I just went down to the Rose Avenue Cafe yesterday and had a beautiful little burrito there, and then Magic. That's Australians are brilliant at making coffee, so I loved it. But his whole thing with Bluestone Lane is human connection and providing an environment for people where they can hang out and socialize. And that was exactly what my point of Training Mate is. So bringing a board on that shares the same philosophy on life, service, and human connection was really important to me. And that's how we're moving forward now. And we're, hoping to go out again and do a more sophisticated round and just spread this globally.
So what do you look for when expanding into like new franchisees? What do you look for in a franchisee to make sure that the consistency between location and location carries on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is becoming more and more important now, right? Because I know different areas, concepts, industries, especially in franchising, it's just like whoever's got a check gets a studio, right? Or whoever's got a check gets a restaurant. We just don't have that mentality. We want to be with like-minded people that are obsessed with making communities that they are involved in better for having been there than not. People that share a healthy lifestyle philosophy. People that care about creating social health, mental health, and physical health at the same rate. Making sure that people, I love team people. I love it. You don't have to be a professional athlete, absolutely not. But I want people on my team who have been in a team, who know that the team is equally, if not more important than themselves as an individual. And sometimes we have to sacrifice as an individual for the team to win. And people with that sort of philosophy, that sort of gusto, self-motivated, and people who just want to make things better, they're the characteristics that I personally look for. And then what we want to deliver on that, and what I take really seriously, is I want to help those people create financial independence. And the margins are good, and the return's good, and the fulfillment's great. And if we can do that for as many people as possible, not only are we creating healthy lifestyles for our members and our clients, but we're also creating financial independence for the people that trust in our process, trust in our message, and trust in my vision.
Love it. So if a listener were to walk in Training Mate today, what does that experience look like? I know a high intensity workout, 45 minutes. What does that look like?
Well, before you even get there, Camo, you get a nickname, right? Because we want to give everyone a nickname. So you'd be greeted with an over-the-top energetic greeting the minute you walk in the door. It'd be, Camo, how are you, mate? Come on in. And then you would be a Joey, which is a baby kangaroo, because it would be your first class. So there's a whole journey, the Joey journey, that you would go on. You get a nickname, we give you a towel, we show you through. The front desk person passes you off to the trainer, who makes sure that physiologically you're great. And if you've got any injuries, any modifications that needed, we're going to talk you through that. And we're going to make sure that we pair you up with someone, with your training mate. And then we're going to make sure that you're not going to go through that by yourself. You're going to feel very valued. You're going to feel like you belong there. And you're definitely not going to feel intimidated, because we would have already taken all of that stress off you by leading you through the studio and the flow of where we're going to go. Once that experience starts, you're going to just get a very high energy, really motivated trainer whose sole purpose is to make your day better and to be the best part of your day and to give you a healthy lifestyle. Again, and I cannot say this enough, social health, physical health, mental health, all equally sort of like pushed down. So making sure that you have a great experience. The way that the studios are designed, it's conducive to having that common communication, like two-way communication. So you're going to get that communication from the trainer, but you're going to be able to communicate with the trainer and with the people that you're working out with as well. You'll be motivated. It'll be a positive experience, and you'll leave there happier, healthier, and fitter than when you walked in.
Love it. Love it. So looking back at, I mean, just the past few years, for example, what are some of the incredible milestones that you could reflect on that you're proud of as a founder of Training Mate? I'd love to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, a lot of the awards are always nice, right? The awards are nice. We've won like #1 studio in multiple cities that we're in. We've been featured across a bunch of different publications. I've been listed as, you know, the #1 trainer in America at a time, and Training Mate's been the hottest celebrity workout in Los Angeles, and they're all really nice. Seeing people hit their milestones is what really drives me. Seeing people complete their 2,000th class.
Wow.
You know, 500 classes, 1,000 classes, 100 classes. Going to people's weddings that met at Training Mate, staff and clients. Yeah. Seeing people build a community outside of Training Mate that they met in Training Mate. And now is actually seeing some of our franchisees create financial independence, buy the house, go on the vacation, put their kids into a private school. That stuff to me, mate, it's like a whole new lease of life, and a whole new motivating and a whole new kick. And I love it.
It's incredible. Well, Luke, I like to conclude each episode with this. If you can share one piece of advice with an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe something you've learned or regret along the way, what would you say that would be?
Mate, just jump in and have a go. Trust me, where you're from is not where you're going. We can always change our stars, and there's no secret pill that makes anyone smarter or more likely to succeed than the person with the focus and with the passion and with the vision. So if you've got passion, you've got vision, go and take care of it. Be of service, be of faith. Go and get out there and sort of create something bigger than yourself. Don't be put down by social media. Don't be deterred by people that you think are richer or went to a better school or whatever. None of that stuff is important. And then I would say, once you go and do that, because there's a couple of points to this, then go and find like-minded people that can always make you level up and always encourage you to evolve as a person, a business person, and then we'll show you how to contribute back to society, because that's another really important part.
So well said. Well, Luke, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. And to the listeners out there, make sure to check out Training Mate at trainingmate.com.
Camo, thanks for having me, mate. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on starting small. I love it. It's so great.
Thank you so much.